In my last review, I said that Ransom for a Dead Man might just be the most important Columbo ever. Prescription Murder was a one-off TV movie. Ransom was specifically created to act as a pilot for a potential Columbo series. Everything was riding on this. If this episode hadn't been a success, we probably wouldn't have heard of Columbo ever again, and I'd be sitting here making the Diagnosis Murder episode guide. For the role of the killer, the producers selected future Oscar winner Lee Grant, a good friend of Peter Falk with whom she had also appeared in movies and on stage. Grant plays lethal lawyer Leslie Williams, an attorney who bumps off her husband Paul in one of the series' most stylized murder scenes.
Well, Leslie, I thought...
Richard Irving, director of Prescription Murder, returns to helm this follow-up. While I didn't mention him in my Prescription review, partly because there wasn't much to say about the direction of that particular installment, here he goes full showboat director mode, including giving us this sick transition. That's so awesome. Leslie covers up the murder as a kidnapping using some crafty editing techniques, manipulating a recorded phone call of Paul to sound like he's being held for, you guessed it, ransom.
They've got me.
As kidnapping is a federal crime in America, the FBI are brought in, led by Agent Carson, but don't worry, the LAPD has sent over their finest officer to act as a police liaison.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes?
Lieutenant Columbo, local police. I seem to have dropped my pen out here somewhere.
In addition to being a lawyer, Leslie is also a private pilot, so she plans to make the ransom drop-off by airmail. This entire sequence is marvelous, showing that clearly no expense was spared in the production of this episode. While this isn't my favorite Columbo, not by a long stretch in fact, it is maybe the most epic, in terms of its presentation at least. Leslie sneakily drops off an empty bag, thus making it look like the kidnappers got away with the cash. The following day, Paul's body is found, and it seems like Leslie's home free. She's gotten rid of her husband and even gets to keep the $300,000 in ransom money all for herself. If only Columbo wouldn't keep asking questions. Why did Leslie not seem to show any genuine concern for her missing husband? Why would the kidnappers take the money out of the bag instead of simply taking the bag itself? And most importantly, why did the bullet which killed Mr. Williams enter his body from a 45-degree angle? Surely, says Columbo, because he was shot while standing up by somebody who was sitting down. Presumably then not an anonymous kidnapper, but someone the victim knew. Agent Carson doesn't like where Columbo's going with this and threatens to overrule him, at which point Columbo shuts his ass down.
Just 1 minute, Mr. Carlson. You see, it's like this. This is not just a kidnapping. This is a murder now. And I kind of figure that's my department. I'll see you around.
Man, Columbo's such a low-key badass.
I'll see you around.
Lee Grant makes for a good villain.
Oh, one of the best.
She's cool, confident, and as cold-hearted as they come. I love her first scene in the courtroom where she's not even listening to what's going on, then throws out a perfectly convincing counter-argument anyway.
Objection. Irrelevant and immaterial.
Sustained.
Her interactions with Columbo are really nice, perfectly portraying the typical Columbo-murderer relationship where she starts off a little amused by him but gradually becomes more and more irritated as he just won't leave well enough alone.
There's a murder out in Malibu they want me to look into.
Wait, what did he just say?
Well, here, let me show you on these panties.
No. Fuck off. We're not doing that one yet. One of the episode's highlights is the scene where Leslie takes Columbo for a spin in her private plane, despite the fact that Columbo is deathly afraid of both heights and flying. This is the first depiction of a recurring character trait that we'd see played for laughs at the lieutenant's expense time and again on the show. And yay, we get more wonderful shots of aerial photography. All of this really is very impressive, especially for a television pilot from the 70s. NBC must have really believed in the Columbo concept.
That's right.
So, all that being said, I did infer earlier that this is not one of my favorite episodes. What problems do I have with it? Well, it primarily hinges on one character in particular that I'm not a big fan of. See, Columbo isn't the only pest Leslie has to deal with. Enter Margaret, Leslie's stepdaughter from Paul's first marriage.
How is my father?
To say that these two hate each other's guts would be putting it mildly. And look, of course I know that conflict makes for good stories or some shit, but I just don't care for this at all. The problem for me, I think, is in the execution. Their mutual dislike feels contrived so as to simply generate more drama. And it's not even good drama, more like a soap opera. Right down to Margaret giving Leslie a good slap to the face on the day of Paul's funeral. I mean, what am I watching here, Columbo or EastEnders?
This. I said tell him! Piggy, tell Dan you're sorry. Tell Dan!
I don't want to sound like I'm being mean to Patricia Maddock, who plays Margaret. She does her best, but this was one of her first acting jobs, and it kinda shows. Her performance feels much more theatrical than the subtleties of Falk and Grant.
Get packed!
To be expected, I suppose, given their status as hardened veterans and hers as a newcomer, but I would be lying if I said it didn't bother me somewhat. It doesn't help that the Leslie-Margaret relationship is such a huge part of the episode. They take up so much screen time together, and in my opinion, it makes Ransom feel like a drag. Whenever these two walk into a room, I'm dying for it to be over so I can get back to the good stuff, which is Leslie's scenes with Columbo, not with Margaret. Ransom is about the same runtime as Prescription, but it feels twice as long.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Margaret does ultimately turn out to be instrumental in helping Columbo take Leslie down. She's the only one, other than him, to believe Leslie had something to do with the death of her father. She goes to meet Columbo while he's having the first of his many chili lunches in the series.
I'll have the chili bird.
The restaurant they're at is Barney's Beanery, a West Hollywood establishment famous for its chili. Columbo would dine here several more times in the future, but as far as I'm aware, this is the only time they actually filmed inside the real-life location, where Falk gets to show off his pool skills. The guy who serves Columbo his meal is Bert, played by Timothy Carey. He reprised his role in Dead Weight, by which point it looks as if his restaurant has fallen on hard times.
Bird, give me some chili.
In both episodes, Carey has a really nice, friendly chemistry with Falk, and it's a shame he didn't appear again.
Well, look at it this way. You'll never be disappointed.
Hey, you got something there.
Oh, and speaking of recurring guest stars, one of the cops early on in the episode is the spitting image of Bruce Kirby, who we'll meet in later seasons, but isn't actually him. Still, I like to believe that this is just a young Sergeant Kramer first starting out on the force.
Not quite yet, sir.
Anyway, I'm getting really distracted talking about chili restaurants and actor doppelgangers. I should really get back to the episode. Oh, did I mention that Margaret's watching Double Indemnity on TV? If you haven't seen it, first of all, do so because it's a classic. But secondly, to summarize the basic plot, it's about a woman who conspires to kill her husband for the insurance money. Nice winking reference there, but why would Margaret watch a movie like that the morning after her own father was found murdered? Also, did you know that in 1986, Peter Falk appeared in basically a comedy remake of Double Indemnity called Big Trouble, directed by longtime friend and collaborator John Cassavetes. But don't worry, we'll get to him. Okay, now I'm really getting distracted. Margaret makes an appallingly clumsy attempt to frame Leslie with phony evidence, which gets her a stern telling off from Columbo.
Now, I'm going to overlook what you did this time, but I want you to remember something. Forging evidence is a crime.
Then she tries to give him a thump too. What a brat.
Young lady, don't you ever do that again.
Before he goes, Columbo drops this great line to Leslie.
I mean, I just can't have you accused of murder on the wrong evidence.
This all leads to a frankly ridiculous scene where Margaret seems to lose her fucking mind and begin terrorizing Leslie like it's a William Castle flick, complete with fake gunshots and shit dropping from the ceiling like a Halloween decoration.
Is that what you want?
God, would you stop with all the slapping? What's next? Investigator Brummer shows up? The point of all this bullshit is that Margaret is willing to leave Leslie alone and stop being such a pain in the ass if Leslie just pays her off, which she does so with a sizable portion of the stolen ransom money, then sends her on her way to Switzerland. But who does Leslie happen to run into at the airport? Only Columbo. And what does he present to her but the very same ransom money that Leslie had just handed over to Margaret? Yep, the lieutenant and the stepdaughter were in it together, tricking Leslie into exposing that she had had the ransom cash all along. As Leslie is led away to a life behind bars, the episode ends on a funny note where Columbo, holding several fat stacks of cash, can't seem to find a few dollars in his pocket to pay for his root beer.
Would you mind if I signed for this? I'm from the police, Lieutenant Columbo.
I guess that'll be all right.
Some people don't like this gotcha because it relies on Leslie being, well, dumb enough to believe that after everything, Margaret would actually be willing to simply shut up and walk away. But I don't mind it because Columbo himself explains why Leslie did what she did, which is in turn how he was able to finally trap her.
Mrs. Williams, you have no conscience, and that's your weakness. Did it ever occur to you that there are very few people that would take money to forget about a murder? It didn't, did it? I knew it wouldn't. No conscience. Limits your imagination. You can't conceive of anybody being any different than what you are. And you're greedy.
So, yeah, overall, I don't think Ransom for a Dead Man is a great episode. It's got some great moments in it, but it's bogged down by too much extraneous shit that frankly isn't interesting. But who gives a fuck what I think? What matters is what audiences in 1971 thought of it, and apparently they really liked it. 6 months after this pilot aired, NBC commissioned a fully fledged Columbo series, which began later that year with Murder by the Book. And I think the biggest factor in why Ransom was such a success is the one key element that I haven't talked about yet: Lieutenant Columbo himself and Peter Falk's performance.
That's what I figured.
As I said in my prescription murder review, the Columbo character we saw there is very different to the one that became famous. He was less rumpled, more sly, even a little cocky. He didn't even wear his raincoat half the time. It's in Ransom that we really begin to see the true Columbo character take shape, whether it be his not being able to find his missing pen in his first scene, his rambling, seemingly pointless anecdotes about random family members.
You know, I have this cousin, Ralph. His name is Ralph.
Or this wonderfully bizarre question about soap.
Well, if you don't mind my asking, when you use one and you put it back in the plate, how do you keep it from sticking to the others?
Look at Carson's face.
It's a problem.
He's scruffy, he's bumbling, he's rough around the edges, but he's smarter than he looks. This is the Columbo we know. This is the Columbo we love.
Oh, thank you very much.
And it's the one that 1971 audiences fell in love with too. Had Falk not endeared himself to audiences so, I don't know if the character would have really caught on. But he did, and we should all be very, very thankful for that.
I don't know how you do it.
Do what?
Work for a woman.
Wait, what?